So good morning, everybody. It's 9 o'clock on Sunday morning. We are here for this third space project, Turning Towards Life again, week 30 something, which escapes me at the moment. It's an absolute delight to be here. We have another source to bring you and a big conversation about an important aspect of being human that we want to bring you. And we are so pleased you're here, whether you're live with us, as many people are increasingly on a Sunday morning, or whether you're watching or listening in later on. Welcome.
I was just going to say welcome to, just to hear my voice a little bit at the beginning of this, and say to anybody who's new, a big welcome to you. Anybody who's watching later, thank you for finding the time to join us, and anyone who's joined us live as well. It's really lovely to see that there are some people who have this as part of their Sunday routine, as I've heard people say it. And it's certainly part of our Sunday routine, so it's lovely that you might be here with us in the moment, as it were. So welcome.
So before we can dive in pretty quickly with this source that we brought to you a poem by Thomas Tranströmer. The thing I want to say about this source before we start to read it is part of the reason that this particular poem is ending up in Turning Towards Life is, as many of you will know, this whole project that Lizzie and I are doing is part of a much bigger commitment we're in the midst of, which is third space coaching, which is a place that we get to work with a whole range of people supporting flourishing and adult development, but it's also a means through which we teach people how to coach in the way that we coach as well. And this poem, whose name I've momentarily forgotten, Romanesque Arches, is a centerpiece of the first day of our Coaching to Excellence program, which is a 2-day orientation to integral development coaching. It's a deep dive into what it is to be human, an exploration of the possibilities of being of service to one another, and it's also a really beautiful chance to engage with our own lives and to ask big questions of ourselves. And this poem shows up right in the middle of the first day, and we are broadcasting and recording this episode in June 2018, and at the very beginning of October 2018 we have a Coaching to Excellence happening in London, 1st and 2nd of October, and it's being led by Lizzie and by our wonderful colleague Sue Braithwaite. So if, as a result of being part of these conversations, you're at all interested in being with us and diving deep into the kind of topics that we've been up to for these last 30-something weeks in person, and maybe beginning to consider the possibility of how you might be a person who can bring those topics and that kind of work to others, it's an amazing way to start, and we would be thrilled to have you with us. So you can find out more about that if you want on the Third Space Coaching website, which is always thirdspacecoaching.com, and we'll be very glad to welcome you. So I was wondering, Lizzie, shall we dive into this source and get going? Would you like to read it first, as I've already had a lot to say?
Yeah. Romanesque Arches by Thomas Tranströmer. Tourists have crowded into the half-dark of the enormous Romanesque church. Vault opening behind vault, and no perspective. A few candle flames flickered. An angel with no face embraced me, and his whisper went all through my body. Don't be ashamed to be a human being. Be proud. Inside you, one vault after another opens endlessly. You'll never be complete, and that's as it should be. Tears blinded me as we were herded out into the fiercely sunlit piazza, together with Mr. and Mrs. Jones, Herr Tanaka and Signora Sabatini. Within each of them, vault after vault opened endlessly.
So I'll read it too. before I read it, I want to say just one thing about Thomas Tranströmer. He's so worth, his work is so worth checking out. He was a clinical psychologist by day, poet, probably all the time. And he didn't write very many poems. You can read all of his work in one slim volume. And this is one of our favorites. One of the things that happened in Tranströmer's life was that he had a stroke, quite a serious one, towards the end of his life. And for a while, it stopped him from writing poetry at all. But later on, as he recovered some of his faculties, he started writing again. But he couldn't write poems even this length. So he ended up writing haiku. Haiku are very tiny 3-line poems based on a Japanese form, and they have a fixed number of syllables in each line. So if you have the chance, go and check out Thomas Tranströmer's haiku, because something extraordinary happened, which was his whole life got poured into these tiny jewel-like forms, the only thing he could write. And they are extraordinary, much as this poem is extraordinary, but in a different way. So his Romanesque arches. Tourists have crowded into the half-dark of the enormous Romanesque church, vault opening behind vault, and no perspective. A few candle flames flickered. An angel with no face embraced me, and his whisper went all through my body. Don't be ashamed to be a human being. Be proud. Inside you, one vault after another opens endlessly. You'll never be complete, and that's as it should be. Tears blinded me as we were herded out into the fiercely sunlit piazza together with Mr. and Mrs. Jones, Herr Tanaka, and Signora Sabatini. Within each of them, vault after vault opened endlessly.
Such a beautiful thing to be read, that. And as you were reading, I found myself standing in the shoes of the person in the Romanesque church. And the line that really moved me was, inside you one vault after another opens endlessly. That there might be a way that something is unfolding. That's not my doing. That's not fixed. That is natural. Feels really hopeful to me, and like a relief from all of the trying and the striving and the wanting to be something. That these vaults, by the way with which we have no perspective, is also one of my favourite lines in this. That it's so hard to see this. And in one way, I think our work is an orientation that this is true, that there is something unfolding, something natural occurring, that we don't have to control things, we don't have to make things so, that there's a natural something that when we become present and deepen into life, the possibility of understanding ourselves as this arrives. And so that never-ending relief of hearing it again and again and again from our community, from you, from those of us who do our work, and others who are in this field of being in the human inquiry, is a very particular and lovely relief for me.
I'm very moved hearing you say that, Lizzie, because of course, as you say it, I can feel the hopefulness in it resonating in me as well.
Mm.
And I get to read this poem with a lot whenever I'm teaching these first 2 days of our work.
Mm.
And it never fails to move me. And I think one of the reasons it moves me is it's in a way, it's the other side of what you've brought, is you were just talking about the hopefulness of knowing that there's this understanding that there's this very deep and natural unfolding that happens within each of us that we often barely know about. And that when we can catch sight of it, we can know ourselves in a, it seemed to me from what you were saying, both we can know ourselves in a far more life-giving way, kinder way, but also maybe we can participate in this unfolding of vault after vault rather than somehow trying to constrain it. And so the part that comes to me very quickly is the constraining side. I think maybe there's a way in which I easily identify with this, the other side of it, which is the misunderstanding of I'm stuck, I'm fixed, nothing will ever change, I'm a tiny something. And of course, there is a way in which we are all a tiny something, and yet we forget so easily I want to use this word, which I heard this week, the grandeur of being a human being, the majesty of being a human being, that we have this vast unfolding inner landscape that can also deeply shape our lives in our engagement, in our relationships, and our engagement with the world. So to not to be ashamed to be a human being, but to be proud, for me, every time is an arresting reminder, because I realize that there's some habitual way, maybe a way that I learned very early on, maybe it's a way that actually just keeps on coming from our culture again and again and again, is that basically we ought to be ashamed. I mean, there's really not that much to a human being apart from maybe we'll get what we want, or we'll keep ourselves safe, or something. Inside each of us, one vault after another opens endlessly, and I want to finish the line, will never be complete. And that's just as it should be.
Interestingly, Justin, the thing that's arising for me is, as you say all of that, the part about being ashamed comes up really strongly, and I've noticed this recently with me, where there is like a deep shame of needing help. And it's so human to be supported and to support and to need help and to not be able to solve this all on my own, and to accept that there is no solution, but to be doing that with someone intimately and really. And I've noticed how excruciating that has felt at times for me. Like there's such a deep narrative of the shoulds of independence. Like I should be able to figure this out. I should be able to handle this. I should be able to not need any help whatsoever. Basically, I should be perfect. And so when you talked about grandeur and this, the other side of that, of the being ashamed because we're kind of basically nothing, we're so small, it really triggered this whole shadow side of grandeur, I think, which is, of course, this is like deep, wonderful, wide mystery about being a human being. And then there's the kind of the calcified version of that, which is I should have this down. I should be great. I should be fine and sorted or something. And then the shame of thinking, oh God, I actually don't know what I'm doing and I need help and I'm really vulnerable. The shame around that, the kind of, oh no, this is awkward, it's embarrassing, it's exposing. I think I'm feeling that a whole new way. And I've just recently got into a whole new supervision relationship as well, which is really beautiful. But this feeling that keeps coming up is like, oh gosh, to actually put ourselves in another person's hands. And we do that in service of ourselves. Like I have to arrange the supervision engagement. I have to sign up to a course. I have to call someone and say I need help. It's like the very act of doing that is a really big thing. The very act of even saying I'm suffering, it's really tricky because it kind of seals us into not getting help and not being supported. Because if I was to feel supported, I'd have to feel the shame even more deeply. So it's really interesting that that's what arose from your talking about grandeur and the bigness and the smallness of being human. And this renewed, refreshed appreciation I have for any of us who say, I need help. And can someone help me, please? And where we make requests and we reveal things about ourselves and we trust people to hold that in the way that we retain our dignity and are dignified by the process of asking for help rather than further diminished or further shamed for needing it in the first place.
That's so beautifully said, Lizzie. And of course, as you're speaking about this, I'm finding that in me, which is like this. And actually what I'm realizing is, as you're speaking, is, oh yeah, I've spoken a lot, as we've been talking about, I suppose, this sense of how we learn as we're children and young adults is often really present to me. And I can see that one of the things that I learned to do was to be really good at stuff. And then to expect that being really good at stuff would sort of sort everything out in life. Being good at the things I was good at. I'm not good at everything by any means, but I got good at a whole load of things. And one of the biggest traps in that is so clearly pointed to by what you just said, and also what Thomas Tranströmer is saying, which is for a long time I came, and often still, of course, came to believe exactly what you're saying, or live in exactly that way. I ought to be able to do this. That's what I'm meant to be able to do. I'm meant to be complete. It would be the worst kind of self-abandonment, but even worse than that, I will find out how terrible I am if I ever let on to people that I'm in trouble, that I'm struggling, that I am this very thing that Tranströmer says we should be proud of, which is never being complete. So I have been practicing for a while, and of course it's right in the heart of our work as well, the way we get to support people. But in my own practice, I've been more recently practicing what happens when I'm more and more transparent about my own troubles and my own difficulty, also my own beauty and grandeur as well. And what I'm finding out about it is, so one of the things the reason I think this poem is so brilliant, angels in all kinds of traditions are not these beautiful, like, I think we confuse angels and fairies. It's going to be this lovely winged thing. No, an angel in all of the biblical myths and other kind of mythologies, an angel is a fierce something. You don't want to come too close to an angel. An angel is frightening, but also an angel is an opening, a life-giving opening into something. And so what Tranströmer says here, which is an angel with, imagine what it would be like to be embraced by an angel with no face. What terrifying, in the half dark of this enormous church, what a terrifying moment, like a threshold moment. And this whisper goes all through us. And what is it? It's not what we're expecting. So this is the thing. So often when so much of my own trouble and also really the biggest suffering has been pretending to be fine when not. We've talked about this before. I've said this before. But it turns out that when we release ourselves into the care of another who will be with us, who will hold us, who will be present with us, and who will see in us exactly what the angel is saying here, that terrifying as it might be, yes, it's also deeply life-giving to find out that we're not in any of this on our own. And what a mistake it is that we have learnt and we have been taught that we are essentially alone and that we have to be alone, that is the way to be a human being, is to make it on your own and sort of bump up against other people now and again, but not too close and not too open. Which is one of the reasons why I love that what happens in this poem, that when the angel with no face, and I suspect the angel has no face because this is not a particular something, and like this is all of us. One vault after another opens endlessly. In fact, maybe this is our collective being as human beings, is that we are the place in which vault after vault opens endlessly. The poet is crowded out into the fiercely sunlit piazza, and in the light suddenly sees actual people. Mr. and Mrs. Jones and Herr Tanaka and Signora Sabatini are all there, real people. And vault after vault is still opening endlessly. Like we can be, the particularity of being in this conversation with you, for example. We need real, actual people around us who we can reveal ourselves to. And find out that it's really beautiful being a person, even in the midst of all of the difficulty. It can be joyful and glorious right in the darkest parts.
And again, Justin, we always, it seems to me anyway, we always come back to it, is the nature of the kind of relationships that afford this beauty in whatever the circumstance is the kind of relationship realm that seems to be a huge part of our lives, a huge part of what our work in the world is being people who are cultivating these relationships for ourselves, but also then being a space into which that inquiry can happen for other people too. And to be the kind of people who stay open and who can tolerate that there is no solution to problems, and that problems and fixing things is just basically out of our reach most of the time when it comes to the deep human problems. And to keep cultivating those relationships that provide a different way of seeing or being or feeling or even sensing, that are not addressing the problem directly, but something much, much bigger than a difficulty or a problem or an issue or something that's happening that is really, really difficult. I was just, Justin, as we were talking earlier, I looked after my niece and nephew yesterday, and certainly spending a day with them, you realise that the problems that arrive actually don't have a solution. And there are the bits that are like, I'm hungry, can I have some food? And you can give them some food. But then the bits that actually cause suffering, like whatever arguments are happening, whatever different perspectives are going on, something different is called on us to work with the stuff that happens between human beings and the stuff that happens between this one and this one, you know, whatever my inner wrangles are. And I just feel like there's this realm of not looking at everything head on, but softening our gaze to look way wider and way more having more perspective. So, you know, the bit in this poem about the fact that the vault's opening behind vaults and there's no perspective, feels like when I like face something head on and try and solve and work with the thing directly, that's not the level at which I need to be in order for it to find movement. And what's necessary in order to be able to do that is these relationships. They just keep coming back to it again and again. If I haven't got the kind of way of dialoguing and revealing and opening into relationship, it feels impossible to work with the breakdowns, the difficulties, the stuff that happens, and the joys too. You know, to be someone who can receive life in all of its goodness and joy is a really big deal. You know, to not just kind of consume life and trample my way through it and have what I have and it not mean anything, for example. To be in relationship even about that stuff too feels like a different way of holding and a different way of addressing and a different way of working with than we've all been taught to do. You know, I was taught at school that if I asked for help in an exam, that I was cheating and I would be disqualified. You know, or homework even. So that's gone really deep. And yet that's the place where so much is resolved, so much is moved forward, so much we find our way through cheating, you know, through being in the position where we actually rely on others to help us and not just think that we should have the answers ourselves, and we get tested on that by life.
I'm thinking a lot whilst you're talking about the difficulty I sometimes have when I tell people that my profession is coaching.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the difficulty is because if there's any understanding of coaching in our wider culture, it's mostly along the lines of the first thing that you were talking about, which is you'll meet someone and the kind of help you'll get will be for your own individual having the way the world be the way you want it.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of problem solving.
Yeah.
And I mentioned last week when we were talking Stephen Fry's tirade against this, against goal setting and getting your goals and all of this.
Mm.
So I understand why people sometimes think that it must be some very shallow, individualistic pursuit. And of course, it's not the work that we're doing and that we're teaching. And what we're bringing people is very much, well, exactly along the lines of what you've just been saying, Lizzie, which is there are problems in life that can be solved. They're worth solving. And then there's the vast array of difficulties, challenges, openings we get into, where solving is inappropriate. First of all, because we can never solve them, and second of all, life wouldn't be that great if we did. Like, if you were and I are in an argument, and the solution to the argument is I get my way every time, and you quieten down, it solves my problem, but it doesn't solve anything.
Mm-hmm.
So instead, it seems to me that when we come into the kind of relationship that you're talking about, which could be with a coach or in a community even better,
mm-hmm.
or with people we love and who love us,
yeah,
one of the things that we can find out there as we allow ourselves to be more and more transparent is a vault opening behind vault. We can find out how spacious we are and how spacious we can be. And that's one of the gifts of being human, and it's never complete. But it turns out that we can widen or allow to widen our capacity to be in life, to be in contact with everything in life, and to be a place in which and through which and between with others in which life shows up. And then when we're in an argument, for example, with one another, it's no longer about me having life go my way, having a coach with me so I'll get what I want, fulfill my goal. It's much more like I'm allowing myself more and more to be a person who can be right in the thick of life with as much compassion and courage and openness and dignity, responsiveness, care, kindness, creativity. And but this is really what it is called on for us both to deepen our lives and also to respond to the complexity of the world in which we live. And it's so different from being told off for asking for help in the midst of an exam. You're right. Or cheating on my homework because I got into dialogue with someone else. No. But we have to all emerge into the fiercely sunlit piazza together, blinking and tears blinding us, and find out, here we are in this vault after vault opens endlessly. Can we honor that and dignify it and do the practical, pragmatic work of knowing that? Which is what I think coaching is for. And community is for. And family can be for sometimes too. So I think we've already reached our 35 minutes, 30 minutes. So although there's much more to say, now is the moment for us to end. So I'll say one thing, maybe you want to say something as well, Lizzie. I want to say thank you to everyone for being with us, as always. I want to remind you all that if you want to go and learn with my wonderful friend and colleague here, Lizzie, then October the 1st and 2nd in London is the place. And I'll see you next week.
Thank you, everybody, for being in this with us. And we will see you next week, next Sunday, here at 9 a.m.